On the 7th of February 2022, 55-year-old Charlie James Hall was arrested for the cold case murders of two men during a violent robbery spree that occurred more than 30 years ago. The authorities say that Charlie attacked at least 16 people in downtown Orlando, Florida, between August and October of 1987. He targeted vulnerable elderly homeless people by beating them over the head repeatedly with a metal bar and stealing their possessions while they slept on a piece of cardboard next to a building. There was minimal financial gain from these vicious attacks, where wristwatches and a few dollars were stolen. On the 24th of August, Lawrence Stewart was found lying on his back in a grassy area, bleeding profusely from his head after being struck with a metal bar in the 400 block of West Robinson Street, and passed away 41 days later. On the 4th of September, Louis Holloway was found unconscious in a parking lot in East Livingston Street. He was struck in the face and head before being robbed and passed away 2 days later. Both victims died from blunt force trauma to their heads, and their possessions were strewn about, and the authorities collected evidence at the crime scenes. On the 16th of October 1987, Charlie was arrested after authorities staked out an area where the attacks took place. When he was brought in for questioning, he confessed to several of the robberies, but denied committing the murders. Charlie said that he was addicted to crack, and that he would suddenly click while walking down the streets. He said he would hear voices in his head and start laughing and talking to himself before going through changes and passing out. Detectives submitted blood evidence in an attempt to link Charlie to the deaths, but the methods in the 1980s were insufficient, and Charlie wasn't charged for the murders at the time. He was, however, imprisoned for the robberies, but was later released in August of 1990. He later served further stints in prison for separate burglaries until October of 2010. The Orlando Cold Case Unit re-examined the two murders in December of 2021. After performing a series of DNA tests on the evidence collected in 1987, investigators went to Charlie's home on the 19th of January 2022. They had a warrant to obtain a DNA cheek swab from Charlie for testing for comparison to the crime scene evidence. Faced with the likelihood that a DNA match would link him to the crimes, he started to confess. When Charlie was questioned by investigators what the chances are that his DNA will come back as a match to the murder weapon, he said he was 80% sure. When asked what keeps him from the other 20%, he said him not wanting to deal with this. He then broke down and cried and said he's been wrestling with this case for 34 years. He said even when he was in prison he couldn't sleep knowing that he hurt a lot of people. The DNA results came back a match, and Charlie was arrested on the 7th of February 2022. He's held without bond at the Orange County Jail. He's been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.